The Waverley is the only sea-going paddle steamer left in the world. She was built in 1947 and weighs 693 tons. The present owners, Waverley Excursions, bought her in 1974 for the sum of £1. After lengthy restoration, they now run trips from various ports around the country. On June the 4th, I travelled on her from Sharpness on the Severn to Illfracombe on the north coast of Devon. This trip had started from Clevedon, so there were quite a few passengers on board already. The Waverley is powered by a triple expansion engine, which at 50 revolutions per minute drives her along at 20 knots. I was interested to see the maker's nameplate.
Going very shortly, George.
This is the first Severn crossing, built in the 60s. It now carries the M48 motorway, although previously it carried the M4. I can remember before this bridge was built, crossing the Severn at this point could be a rather hair-raising trip on a ferry, which at times, depending on the tide, was swept up or downstream, and if the weather was too rough, did not run at all. The reason the first Severn crossing now carries the M48 is that this, the second Severn crossing, built in the late 90s, now carries the M4. But this chap has no time for bridges. Ship shape and Bristol fashion must be particularly apt here. It's nice to know what all these pipes are for. Well, maybe not. Now we are getting into the Bristol Channel. We pass the island of Flat Holm. And in the distance, Steepholm. With the more open sea comes a colder and stronger wind. Soon there are far fewer people out on deck, but for me this is a nostalgic trip, and I do not wish to miss any of it. In the 50s and early 60s I used to travel on the Campbell steamers from Bristol to Illfracombe, and now, as the coast of northeast Devon comes into view, I am reminded of these trips. The lighthouse at Forlan Point, and now Lynmouth, where after the floods of 1952 there was for a long time debris floating in the bay. Campbell steamers used to call here, but as there is no landing stage, passengers were taken off in small boats, which could be quite hazardous in rough weather. Between these hills is Heddon's Mouth. The Heddon was another river swollen by the 1952 floods. It took the water that flooded the village of Illfracombe and marooned my aunt on the bar of the Fox and Goose pub where she worked. Coomartin. It has the longest village street in the country. Watermouth Castle, once a stately home, now a country club. The white cottages on the hillside once accommodated the local Coast Guard. Now they are let to holiday makers. As we round Beacon Point, we see Illfracombe, our destination, as it was so often over 40 years ago. Preparations are made for docking. The chapel on Lantern Hill still looks down, but the old wooden pier has been replaced by a new concrete one. An improvement, I suppose, but it lacks the character of the old one. Gone is the sound of water lapping against partly submerged timbers. So, here we are. I shall have a couple of hours in the town of my birth, and then it will be back on board for the return trip.